We talked a long time before, and Sway, I think she's going to be the person that interviews me about who I am and why we started the podcast. So that might have to be an episode coming up because she's had a lot of great questions.
I'm down.
She's going to be the next Fremont Podcast host. So she's great.
Guest host.
There you go, guest host. There you go. All right, so sorry.
Coming to you straight from Fremont, California, this is the Fremont Podcast, dedicated to telling the stories of the past and present of the people and places of the city of Fremont, one conversation at a time.
This is Stevie at Devout Coffee. Happy 50th episode, Ricky.
Now, here's your host, Ricky B.
We're recording now, so you can feel free to begin whenever it is that you would like. So it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fremont Podcast.
That sounds really good. I like it.
That was my only chance. Did I do well? Should I do it again?
No, that was great.
Okay.
That was really, really great. Yeah.
Well, so welcome, everyone. You may not know me, but my name is Sway, and I am the owner of Forest and Flower in Fremont on Mission Boulevard. And I have the pleasure of being here sitting with Ricky B today, your normal, usual, the Fremont Podcast host here.
It's a privilege to be here. It is a privilege to be here.
So I don't know if you have guessed, but today the table is turning.
That's right. That's right.
I have this honor to interview Ricky today.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have you interview me because if you've listened to the previous episodes, you would have known who Sway is because I interviewed her in the Fremont Podcast earlier. When we initially met and we talked, Sway asked me some great questions that they were the kind of questions that I would hope that I'd be able to ask people on interviews. And so when we got to talking, you told me, you don't talk about you that much on the podcast. And we hear about everybody else, but you don't talk about yourself that much. And I thought, well, we could episode 50. It's a landmark episode, and then you should interview me. So that's where this whole conversation started.
Yes, and I'm feeling really, really grateful to be able to do this. So we're just going to get started.
Good. Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Ricky.
Yeah.
So tell me your story. So maybe let's start where you're from originally.
Okay. Yeah. So I was born in Wisconsin. I proudly claim the fact that I'm a Midwestern farm kid. Although I wasn't born and necessarily reared on a farm, I did spend a chunk of my childhood out in the country. There was a portion of my childhood that we lived in the middle of not cow pastures, cornfields, and so I would spend a lot of time out in the cornfields. But my grandparents had a dairy farm in Michigan, and I would spend my summers on their farm, and so I spent a lot of time outside. I really enjoyed farm life, the country. When I was 9, my family moved to the Carolinas, and I spent 22 years of my life in South Carolina, and a lot of different things happened while I was there. I got involved in theater. I actually traveled for about 10 summers around the eastern United States performing music and drama, theater, that sort of thing. In 2011, I moved to Baltimore. I actually worked for a church there for a little while. And I was involved specifically in helping inner city youth and also working in music. And then in 2014, I moved to Fremont, to the Bay Area. So that's like the landscape of where I kind of lived throughout my life.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So last time when you were here having our interview, you did tell me about, there are a couple of things I want to touch on.
Yeah,
so one thing is about theater.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought that's really amazing. How did you get into theater? And why did you leave theater?
Okay.
And then let's start from there.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I grew up in a very poor home. Like, my family did not have a lot of money, and we were I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so we had a big family. But we did not have a lot of money, but my family learned how to be a family together. We worked together. I don't remember a time since I was 11 years old that I wasn't working to help provide for our families. Not me alone, but our family would work together, like cleaning businesses and doing projects and stuff like that. So it was always doing that. Well, one of the schools that was near where I lived was a private school called the Academy of Arts. The school doesn't exist anymore, but it was called the Academy of Arts. And a friend of ours, offered to pay mine and my brothers and sisters' way to this private school. So I ended up going to it, and they, among other things, they focused on music and theater and speech and that sort of thing. And so I kind of got into it just because I had the opportunity to be there. Somebody paid for our way to be a part of that school. But as I got older, I was involved in, a lot of the theater shows that they put on. I was involved in choir. I was involved in a lot of different things. And then it just became, as I was there, the longer I was there, I began to have these opportunities that kind of revealed both a kind of a gifting that I had, as well as a passion that was kind of blossoming at that time. And so when I was 14 years old, I actually started traveling. That's when I stopped going to my grandparents' farm, and I started traveling around the eastern United States and performing in places all over the place. And I really enjoyed it. I actually I'm not a great actor, and the thing that I actually, in the performing arts, the thing that I excelled in was actually singing. So I do enjoy singing, and but I also did a lot of the technical side of theater, the back side. So I did a lot of the audio, video. I did help build the sets and paint the sets and stuff like that. So I did a lot of the backstage stuff. And I just kind of had a well-rounded experience, and I did that. I traveled every summer for 10 summers till I was 25. And then I traveled 6 years when I graduated from high school till I was 25. So 6 years. I did it all the time. So
yeah. You said you love singing.
Yeah.
Would you sing something for us?
Right now?
Hey, see, I'm looking out for you guys.
There you go. What do you want to hear?
I don't know. What?
Well, it's almost Christmas time.
Yes.
So we could do a man, was not expecting this. So let's see.
You're the one who brought it up.
That's right. Let's see what happens. So I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. All right, that's all we're getting.
Wow. Okay.
I'm sitting down and there was no warm up there.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Without warm up, I can't imagine if you already had warmed up. So yeah, so we talked last time about why you left theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you mind sharing that?
Yeah. So there was a lot of good things that I experienced while I was traveling. There was a lot of really, there are things that have changed my life, and things like, even this podcast, the ability to not have stage fright, the ability to approach people, to actually be more curious about life than to be just a spectator, to be more engaged in the world around me. I think theater kind of helps. I think it kind of helps gives you that perspective that you carry into your normal life. And so I think that there's a lot of things that I've benefited over my life that I took from that time. But on a negative side, for a number of different reasons, there was. So the theater group that I traveled with was a kind of a, they talk about big fish in small ponds, right? So I actually was pretty successful, and I was pretty, I think I was pretty remarkable in what I did, and people recognized me, and I started, recognizing that for myself. And I think that there came a time where I became very self-focused and very what I was doing, I did for almost my own self-glory in that way. And also so I kind of experienced some changes in my thinking. I was going through this kind of like this personal reformation time in my own life where I was trying to figure out who I was and what really mattered in life to me and that sort of thing. And I think it just kind of put me at odds with what I had always done and who I was always with. We'll be right back with the rest of the conversation in just a moment.
Hello, this is Andrew. I'm the editor here at the Fremont Podcast. Ricky gave me an assignment. He asked me to walk around Fremont and collect as much street music as I could find. And so for the entire month of November, we are going to feature the music that I found. Here's this week's street music.
Ahora vienes de pronto a que yo me haga cargo de tu desamor, no conforme con irte de mí, todavía me has venido a avisar que los platos que yo no rompí, al contado los debo pagar. Tú bien sabes que yo de buen modo me dispongo a brindarte mi ayuda, pero quiero enterarme de todo y salir de una vez de la duda. Aprovecho para preguntarte si me buscas por ser buena gente o has venido de nuevo a buscarme por la P que me has visto en la frente. No conforme con irte de mí, todavía me has venido a avisar que los platos que yo no rompí, al contado los debo pagar. Tú bien sabes que yo de buen modo me dispongo a brindarte mi ayuda, pero quiero enterarme de todo y salir de una vez de la duda. Aprovecho para preguntarte si me buscas por ser buena gente o has venido de nuevo a buscarme por la P que me has visto en la frente.
That was great. You're a driver.
Yeah, I'm the driver for Fremont Transit.
Oh, cool. And now, I'm sure Ricky needs to talk to you about our sponsors.
This is Jennifer Petroselli at Petroselli Homes Realty Group on Niles Boulevard. Congratulations on your 50th episode, Ricky. I've loved listening to you each week as you bring the community of Fremont together, and I'm excited to hear what you have in store for future episodes.
Welcome to Dale Hardware. This is Richard from the DCIS office. Happy 50th episode, Ricky, on the Fremont Podcast.
Now, back to our episode. One of the stories that I tell, and this is not to like brag on myself or to and I don't even know, nothing may have happened from this, but when I went to Disney World down in Orlando, Florida one time, and I'd always go to the live shows that they had, and they had a live show of Beauty and the Beast, right? And so I was talking to the stage manager afterwards, and they were just saying that how the people the actors that they had playing Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, they'd all like gone to Broadway and stuff, and they were needing more actors to fill this role. And the guy was like, "You look like you can sing. You look like the size of Gaston. I bet you would you be interested?" I was like, "Yeah, I love that role." And so he's like, "Well, here." He gave me a card and he said, "Here's the person that does all the interviews for Disney World, and you could call him today and he could do an audition for you today." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this would be amazing." But it was just it was at a critical time in my life where I was trying to figure out who I was and why I was doing what I was doing. And I didn't do the audition, but it also made me think of how much I needed to say what is really valuable in life for me and what really matters the most. And ultimately, there was kind of like a collision. There was a point in my life where I just made it. I went through a series of circumstances that this was just not the place where I was going to stay for long. The rest of my life. And so I learned a lot of lessons that from kind of like this intersection in my life, this kind of this collision that happened in my life. And I just kind of walked away from doing anything with theater or music and stuff like that for a little while. So I think a lot of it had to do with me trying to figure out who I am and what really matters in my life. And then also kind of being a little bit scared that, I was kind of living my life for me. I was living my life so that I could be recognized by people and seen by people and that sort of thing. So yeah.
So now, from what I'm seeing, a lot of your lives is being in service of others, which also from our last conversation, you did tell me that your mother would basically provide safe spaces for people in your home.
Yeah.
She would just invite people to come in and live with you. So how, just tell me more about that. How did that shape who you are today and your service?
Yeah, that's great. My mom passed away last summer, and she was my hero in a lot of ways. And I had a lot of the opportunities that I was able to take advantage of, even doing theater, because of the sacrifices of my parents, and specifically even my mom, because she worked very hard for us to make sure we had opportunities that she didn't really have, and that they couldn't provide for us otherwise. And so my parents were very much that way. But the sacrifices that specifically my mom, offered were not just for me. It was very normal for me to come home from, like, say, college or just being out traveling and coming back, and my mom and dad would say, "Hey, just so you know, Steven's staying in the basement." And I'd be like, "Who's Steven?" And like, "Well, he's a alcoholic that we found on the side of the road, and we decided to give him a place to stay, and we're trying to help him get a job and find his own apartment." And I could name, a couple dozen people that stayed with my parents for long periods of time, and sometimes multiple times. They would stay with them for a little while and try to go out on their own, and it didn't work out, so they'd come back and stay with my parents again, And my mom was kind of the catalyst. She was the one who made that possible for them. I think there's a program now, like Panera Bread. They have this program, like when they're done with the night, they take all their old bread and their pastries and whatever, and they provide it for nonprofits to kind of like share with people who are homeless or people who are less fortunate. And I think that my mom, I don't want to give my mom all the credit for it, but I think my mom might have been the reason why that started, because early on my mom she was not embarrassed by anything. Like, my mom found this way of finding groceries that would provide for our whole family. So we would go into the grocery store, and my mom would tell all of us kids, there were 6 of us, right? Go look for all the expired food. And so we would scour the grocery store for expired milk, expired bread, expired whatever, and then we'd put it all in these carts, and then she would walk right up to the manager and say, "Everything's expired, or it's going to be expired tomorrow. I'll give you $10 for everything."
I love this woman.
And so we got used to, just whenever we went grocery shopping, we'd always look for to this day I always look for the expiration date, because it's just the way that my mom, and she would take everything home, and we'd have carts and carts full of stuff, and we had this big massive chest freezer in our basement, and she would just throw like all the milk in there and all the bread in there, just so that it wouldn't start to spoil. And then whenever we needed milk, she would just say, go down to the freezer and thaw out a gallon of milk, or get the bread. But she also, it wasn't just for us. She didn't just hoard it for us. Like, she started finding these people all around the town that we lived in that were needy, and that also could benefit from this excess. And and then that, coupled with like stuff that she would get from Panera Bread, she had a route. She would drive around our town and just ask, "Hey, do you need any bread? Do you need any milk? Can I do anything for you?" Just out the window, and people would oh, sure, I'll take whatever you have. And I asked her one time, I guess maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I said, how many people do you think that you drop bread or whatever off to? And she said, probably maybe 150 people. And I'm just like, it blows my mind, you know? And here's a woman who we didn't have anything, you know, but she was probably the most generous and most compassionate person that I had ever met. And so in some sense, I was the beneficiary. I was the direct beneficiary by one being her son, but also by being her oldest son. I never thought of me being like the special one of us, but I think that if you were to ask my brothers and sisters, there was a special treatment that I received as being the oldest, that they didn't get the same opportunities that I did. But that also fed into like maybe a slight entitlement that I had as an older person, and maybe more of a self-focused person. But when I look back at it, I just think, if I could do half the work that my mom did, I think I would say that my life was I was successful at being a human being, you know?
Yeah.
My mom just loved and served people extremely sacrificially. And I got to be the beneficiary of that, but I also got to see it modeled for me as well. Yeah.
What's her name? I just think it's important.
Yeah. Lois. Her name was Lois. Yeah.
Yeah. Lois.
So, and she died last spring, and she had a stroke, and I would not have wanted to see her stuck in a bed, you know, and I'm just really thankful that she was able to pass quickly. She had a good life. She lived a great life and has a great legacy, and we'll always miss her. So yeah.
Was she, or were your family ever worried about taking people in, you know, safety wise?
I mean, the first time my parents brought somebody home, I was like 4 years old, and we picked up a hitchhiker on the side of the road. It was an African-American man. I remember picking him up. He was in the rain on the way back from Milwaukee, because I lived in Wisconsin, and she picked him up. My mom and dad picked him up on the side of the road, and he came and stayed with us. And I just never, ever remember at least them exhibiting or communicating a sense of fear or concern. And so because of that, I just always viewed it as not something that I should be concerned about, but something that, you know, this is the kind of good that we ought to be doing, you know, for people. So yeah. So I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. I don't know. Yeah.
That's really amazing, because I imagine these days that's something that people would think about. It's unsafe.
Well, I actually got I don't even know. I actually got carjacked at knife point because I was stopping to help somebody.
Oh my goodness!
At one point, yeah. So this was, I don't know, this is probably 16, 17 years ago. I saw somebody driving the opposite direction at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to tell the whole story on here, but I saw them. We were on the highway, and they were going the opposite direction. They ran off the road, crashed into like some guy lines that were there in the median, and I pulled over real quickly and came down there, and the guy was trying to get out, finally crawled out of his car. I realized he was drunk. But I offered to be there to help him, and I said, "Hey, here's my cell phone. You can call somebody to come help get you or whatever you need." And he insisted that I take him to a payphone to get something. And I was just like so excited that I got to be able to help this guy, and that he wasn't dead, and that I could be there to help be this person for him. And he just kept insisting that I take him to a payphone, and I just wanted to get home. So I was like, "Fine, I'll take you to the payphone." And I was talking to him, trying to, you know, figure out, you know, what I could do to help. And when I got to the gas station where the payphone was, I was looking. I had never carried cash on me, but I had cash on me, and I just thought, man, I can help this guy out. So I was looking for that, and I was not even paying attention to him, but he was sitting in the passenger seat, and I was like, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And I turned to him, and he had a knife stuck up to my ribs. And he said, "Just get out of the car." And he had totally changed. And he was drunk too, so it was kind of this whole thing. And I actually started trying to negotiate with him. And I said, "Look, I'll take you wherever you need to go. We don't have to do this. I'm not going to say anything to anybody. Just, you don't have to do this." And he kept getting more agitated and more insistent. So I was like, fine. And I went to put the car into park. And he was like, "Don't touch anything." And I said, "Well, if I don't put the car in park, it's going to end up in the ditch." And, you know, so anyway, I put it in park. I got out and I called 911 on my phone, and I read my license plate numbers off to the 911 operators. He drove off with my car.
Wow.
And so actually, to say what you did, I was never fearful of helping somebody.
Yeah.
And ever since that time, that experience that I had, I wasn't actually even scared in that moment because I thought I was there to help. I thought it was providence that I was there to help. Yeah. And so when he did that, I just thought, well, whatever's supposed to happen is supposed to happen,
Yeah.
And he actually told me where he was going, and he was right. And the police found him there, and they found my car, and he had done like $3,500 worth of damage to my car. And I was a poor, kid at the time. Mm-hmm. Part of his sentence was to pay restitution for my car, the damages done to my car.
Yeah.
So for the next 10 years, including the after moving here to Fremont, I would get random checks in the mail from the solicitor's office, and it would be hard times, like times when my family we were low on funds or whatever, and I would just be like, I don't know what we're going to do, and then I'd get a check in the mail from the solicitor's office from this guy who had hijacked my car years ago, and it would be like perfect timing for whatever it was that we had at the time. So for me, to this day, I do hesitate when I see people on the side of the road.
Yes.
Because I did get held up at knife point.
Right.
But I think that there's a part of me that says, whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and they really need. There are people out there that genuinely need help, and they're not scary people.
Yeah.
They're just different. Different. They're in a different place of life than we are.
Yeah. Well, so that brings me to community. Mm-hmm. What inspired you to start the Fremont Podcast?
Yeah. So I said a lot of random, one-off things on different episodes, about what inspired me to start the podcast. There is a part of me that I just enjoy getting to know people. So years ago, I went to a coffee shop in South Carolina that I found myself pulling up to the bar and just talking with anybody who was there. And it would be anybody. I was a construction worker at the time, and it might be a philosophy student, or it might be a businessman, or it might be a whoever. It was just different people, and we would just talk. And I would remember having these conversations and just thinking, this is just so fascinating. I'm learning so much from these random people that just showed up. And I actually at the time had even thought, well, this would be kind of cool to have like this live stream with cameras on the bar and microphones, and just whoever shows up, like anybody could tune in from anywhere and just listen to the conversation that was happening. It's kind of like the TV show Cheers, everybody knows your name. You just like everyone's just talking it up, and that kind of, I think, was a place where I began to start thinking about it originally. But I think that when I moved to Fremont, and why the Fremont Podcast even makes more sense, is that I realized all the people that I was meeting here for myself, they're just so fascinating. There's so many cool stories of people's lives that just are like, we miss them. Like we walk by these people. We don't know where they're from, what they do, what they love, what makes them tick, and yet, whenever I stop to talk to someone here in Fremont or anywhere, I just find, man, I'm so glad I met that person. I'm so glad that I had that conversation. And I think that one of the challenges for the city of Fremont is that we are so diverse. We have, I think, I can't remember if I said it in your episode. I've said it at least once on an episode where I said, I called Fremont a melting pot, and they were like, no, Fremont's not a melting pot. It's more like a stir fry. and the idea is that we, like in a melting pot, everything kind of the constitution of something becomes like everything else. And Fremont's not that way. Like you have very distinct subcultures and all these, you have the Indian community, you've got the Afghanistan community, you've got the Chinese community, you've got the Korean community, and although we kind of cross paths and we rub up against each other, we kind of retain our constitution and our culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just like I just thought we should put more effort into getting to know one another, because even and I actually think that if you go back and listen to the episodes from the Fremont Podcast, you will find we've had people from all different places, all different walks of life, all different backgrounds that have been on the podcast, and it's hard for me to say that you can't benefit from somebody who has a completely different story than you do.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
a very inclusive place,
Yeah.
the Fremont Podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important because, I mean, the truth is that, I did a series. Ironically, it's had the least downloads. The fewest people have listened to it. But I did a series in the spring. I interviewed one of the leading Islamic teachers in Fremont.
Oh, I heard. Was it 3
yeah,
episodes,
yeah.
right?
It was one of the leading Islamic teachers, one of the Jewish rabbis, and then a Christian pastor.
Yeah.
And I talked to him about Ramadan. I talked to him about Passover, and I talked to them about Easter, right? And they had the fewest downloads of all the episodes, and there's probably different reasons for that. But I think that I say that to say one of the things that at the beginning of those episodes, I said they say never to talk about money, religion, or politics, right? Those are things we don't talk about. Well, what we believe and what we vote for and where we spend our money tells people a lot about who we are,
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for me, we ask, why does community matter? Well, the truth is that, I have been in a Christian church my whole life,
mm-hmm.
and I've been involved in church my whole life. Even the main reason why I moved to Fremont was to be a part of a church that was starting here in Fremont. And I think that there's something about the church community that is, whether you believe in a religion, whether you accept, somebody's religious, dogma or beliefs or whatever, most religion, and I learned that in those interviews. When I interviewed the Islamic teacher, I learned something about Islam that was very helpful for me to understand how to engage with the Islamic community around us, and even the Jewish rabbi, to engage with him and to hear what they're trying to do, and all of those things are influenced by what they believe, And so I would say, I'm a part of a church here. Being a part of the church is not the reason I did the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast is something that I think, sure, is what I believe part of who I am, and does it influence my decision making? Absolutely. But the truth is, I'm not trying to use the podcast as a way to kind of like force people into my belief system, But I do think that one of the things that I do believe is that we ought to be a blessing to our community. We ought to find ways in which we look at the good that is in our community and the things that other people bring into our community that is beneficial. And when we stop to focus on all the negative things that are happening and all the bad things that people are doing, we do all of that, it only can spiral downhill from there.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I do believe, and one of the things that I'm influenced by, is what I believe, that there is good that is possible. There is hope for the world. There is hope for our community. And one of the things that I wanted to do is personally be a catalyst in our community to help point people's attention toward good and toward hope. There is a kind of a big philosophical reason why, but there's also just a very practical, like, we should stop and get to talk to people around us just to get to know them.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember last time when we met, I asked, why don't you talk more about yourself? And that was one of the reasons, is that you don't want people to misunderstand or misconstrue that you are using the podcast as something else. But
everyone's going to have an opinion about what religion they believe and what, and when you hear
unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And when you hear something about somebody, or you do your stalking, your research on somebody, who is this, all of a sudden you start creating a profile in your mind of who they are. You make up a story about who they are, And I think what I told you is that I just, when people discover more about who I am, I kind of want to be part of the discussion,
Yes.
I don't want to be someone who's left out of that discussion,
Mm-hmm.
And so I've never tried to hide, the reason why I'm here in Fremont, or the things that influence me. But I also don't want to scare people away, because I do think that it's very easy for us to create an opinion about somebody.
Yeah.
And then just assume that's who they are, write their story without them being involved.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, now we've got something we've got to work through,
Yeah, that's very common, especially in these days.
Yeah.
I have a list of questions
Good.
that I've written down, but one of the questions that I did write down was, what is your hope for the time we're in? And you kind of already talked about that.
Yeah.
So can you just maybe kind of tease out that, what I heard you said was it's your hope for people can, sit down and learn more about each other and talk more about the community.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that one of the, Sway, you made tea for me. You asked me if I wanted tea when I first got here, and I didn't. I said I didn't want anything. I said I was fine. But then when you started pouring tea, I was like, wait a minute, no, I want some tea. I want to be able to. And I'm saying that for a reason. I think one of the things that I think is very important for us is that we become so concerned about efficiency and so concerned about like making sure that every moment is filled with something to where I can say I was productive with my day and I don't feel like, or maybe we're not even that, we're not even that responsible about our time. We just don't want to, if I have time, then I'm going to be on my phone looking at social media or, whatever. When in reality, I think that one of the things that I hope to encourage is, is that we would sit down and talk to each other, that we would create margins in our life to say, I'm going to go to the coffee, and I do this, not as consistently as I'd like to, and probably not as much as I used to, but I do this where I say, I'm going to go to the coffee shop. What are you going to do? I don't know, but I'm planning on being there for an hour and a half. Who are you meeting? I'm not meeting anybody, but I'm not, I have no one that I'm planning to meet, but someone's going to be there that I'm going to talk to, and I just want to know who they are and start a new relationship. Mm-hmm. But there's an intentionality about both why I'm going and also intentionality about the margin and space that I'm giving myself to be able to accomplish that sort of of a mission,
Yes.
And so for me, I tell people, and this could be said about tea as well, but tea and coffee is one of those things where I think that it has this unspoken statement about what I think about how I value you or how I understand you to be. So, for instance, by refusing your tea, I'm saying to you, no, I've got somewhere else I've got to be. I need to make this as clean and quick as possible. But by accepting your offer for tea, I'm saying I'm willing to take a hot drink that might take me longer to drink because it's hot.
Yeah.
It's also intended to be sipped. And there's also a kettle here. It's not just one cup. But I'm here for that. I'm here to be able to have that conversation,
Yeah.
So I think what I would love for people to do is just to say, I say this, my son is 10 years old. He doesn't have social media. But one of the things that I hope to teach him and try to help guide him in when he does have social media is that if he doesn't have the ability to make friends in real life where he gets hurt by them and he hurts them and they have to work it out and they have to forgive and they have to get through it. If he can't make those kind of friendships, then he has no business making friends on Facebook, because Facebook friendships are not real friendships, right? Social media and technology ought to be an extension of reality, not our new reality, And so I think that, sure, I stay connected with you. I don't even have your phone number, Sway, but we stay connected through Instagram, right? Right. But and so there's an extension of reality because we have a relationship. We've gotten to know each other that way. But I would say that what I don't think, and what I think is where we're headed, and what I kind of want to curb is I want to curb this idea that, I can have everything that I need in relationships on social media. And I think that's just a big lie, you know. I think people need to get out and say, no, I'm going to put that away and I'm going to go spend time with people in my community and get to know them. I'm going to create margins in my life so that I can be able to spend time. Because honestly, we are such a workaholic society, and we're such a society that we feel like we have to get and we have to work as much as we can to get, and we just forget about being human. You know, we forget about the idea that we're human beings and we have human needs, and one of our biggest ways to see those needs met is by just spending time together.
Yeah.
And talking.
Yeah. What just came up for me is, we were in line somewhere, you're seeing people on their phones probably a lot of times. I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of times probably checking social media, trying to see what this influencer is doing versus maybe saying hi to the person that's next to you.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I remember growing up as a kid and just talking to people in line. Yeah. And now it's like nobody talks to each other anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So or at the restaurants, you see a whole family on their devices.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm guilty of this too. I'm not going to sound like I'm like the the person that's doing all this. I have to keep correcting myself and saying, get off your phone. You get off your phone. Yeah, I remember. I don't know if I told you this, but I remember my son asking me years ago, Dad, why do you love your phone so much? And I was like, I don't love my phone. And he said, yeah, you do. You're always on it. And I realized that as a child, he equated the amount of time that I spent on my phone and attention that I was giving my phone to being equal to what I love. And I realized what he's asking me is, why don't you spend time with me and give me your attention?
Yeah. What a great lesson that he taught.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I follow you on Instagram.
Okay.
I see you are out in nature a lot.
Yeah.
So I am just wondering if you can tell me more about nature. What does nature mean to you? Because for me, if people have heard the last episode that Ricky and I did, we talked quite a bit about nature and nature's lessons. So would love to learn more about that from you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I love these questions. So I kind of said at the beginning, I grew up in the country, so I spent a lot of time out and about, and I've always enjoyed being in the woods. I've always enjoyed being in the wilderness. When I moved here in 2014, I needed to find a job that I would just, in the community. So I got a job at REI. And so when I worked for REI, I worked there for about 5 years. And right away, it became like just a fit for me that was just, really great. But I'd never lived or really even visited the West Coast before. So I didn't know what was all around me. But I'd have people come into the store asking, I'm going on this trip, I'm going to this place, and I'm doing this. What do I need to know? And I was like, I don't know. I've never been there. So I really started just like whole hog started going out and visiting all these places, climbing mountains, backpacking in Yosemite and backpacking in the Sierra and all these things. So I spent a lot of time out there, and REI was a great company to be able to provide the opportunities to get out there and to do some really amazing things. But you asked me, what does nature mean to me? And there's a lot of ways that I could probably answer that. But there's one. I actually was a part of a business. I owned a business with my brother and with a friend. It was called Santerre. And we had it for about 3 years, up until the beginning of COVID. But the business was called Santerre, and where that name came from was a story that was told about John Muir. And John Muir, the story goes something like this. I'm gonna probably ruin it, but I'll say it the best I can. So he was asked, I heard that you don't like the word hike, and John Muir said, I don't like the word hike, nor do I like the action. He said, one does not just hike into the wilderness, but a person saunters into the wilderness. And he said, do you know where the word saunter comes from? And John Muir goes on to talk about, he goes back in the Middle Ages, people would be on pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And he said they would travel through towns, and people could recognize the fact that they were on a quest, on a crusade to the Holy Land. And people could see something different about them, the way that they traveled through the towns and with a purpose in mind, and the way they traveled intentionally. They viewed things intentionally. And he said people would say about them, he said, they're a la Santerre, or they would say, I'm going to the Holy Land. And that's where he said, John Muir said that's where the word saunter comes from, a la Santerre, to the Holy Land. And John Muir goes on to say, is not the wilderness our holy land? Is it not the place? Should we not walk through the wilderness with reverence and awe and wonder? And so then the account goes on to talk about the fact that John Muir lived up to his way of thinking. He would be the last one to camp when they were out in the wilderness. He would stop and he'd be down on his hands and knees and he'd invite other people to come look at some microscopic flower. And then he said, it's called the parable of the saunterer. And in this parable of the saunterer, it says, should we not also walk through life in the same way? Should we not walk through it? Instead of measuring life in time and in money and in accomplishments, we should measure time in beauty and in relationships. So we started this business to help take people who were part of the Silicon Valley and part of this area, to take them out in the wilderness to experience what it was like to slow down and just look around and just take it all in, to change the way we value things, not just in like, I did 15 miles today. Well, why don't we do 1 mile today and let's just do it really, really well? Yes. I used to tell people all the time, we focus on the quality of miles, not the quantity of miles, And so I think that was something that, I think that's something that influences me whenever I go out into the wilderness. And that business doesn't exist anymore. My business partners all moved. One moved to Colorado, one moved to Washington State, and we had to close the business down. But I think the mentality behind the name Santerre is what I'll always take with me. Yeah.
I love that. It's such a great reminder. Yeah. Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we got to wrap it up.
Yep.
So I have a list of rapid fire questions for you.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
What brings you joy?
This is going to sound so cheesy, and it's not, like, I truly mean this. Making other people happy. I love being a catalyst in other people's lives to help make them happy. So that might sound weird and cheesy, but that's my answer.
Okay. I love it. What's your superpower?
Seeing people's vision and trying to do what I can to help them achieve it.
What can the world use more of and less of?
More vulnerable love. And I think we could use less of ourselves. And what I mean by that is I think we could use less of making life all about me. Yeah. Being willing to look and listen, stop and listen to other people before we talk. And that's a huge one that I need to hear myself say, because I talk a lot. But I need to listen more, and I need to really not just listen, not just hear, but listen, tune into what somebody else is saying. Yeah.
Okay. Top 3 places you would recommend other people to visit in Northern California?
Ooh, I love Yosemite Valley. I've taken people there dozens of times, and I just love Yosemite Valley. If you've never been, you must go. It's so amazing to me how many people live here in California and have never been to Yosemite. It's like one of those things that's like, I can go there anytime, so I don't need to go there now. And it's like, no, you need to go there right now. So Yosemite Valley. I think that honestly, I mean, I think the national parks kind of got it right. Sequoia Kings Canyon is phenomenal. Like, there's so many incredible things about Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. The trees, Morrow Rock, go down into the Kings Canyon. It's just phenomenal. And then I think, top 3 places. So when I was at REI, we had our badges said our name on it, and it said the place that we love the most. And my badge said Highway 1 and Highway 395. And if you know Highway 1 and Highway 395, Highway 1 goes north to south all the way down the western side of the state along the coast, and Highway 395 goes north to south all the way down the eastern Sierra. So I love those 2 routes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Okay.
Because food is my thing.
Okay.
What is the most adventurous food you've eaten? Because you've traveled quite a bit.
I have. I was just in Africa. I'd have to say probably I ate python in Africa when I was just there in March. So
how was it prepared?
It was in a stew almost. Like it was boiled, and then it was almost like it was in like in a gravy in a stew with onions and other kind of native herbs and stuff like that. But it was python. So that might be the most adventurous. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. I don't know. I think that might be it.
Was it eaten in a communal kind of setting?
Well, I mean, we it was a table overlooking a waterfall. I was the only one that ordered python. And I think it was partly because I wanted to see what it was like.
Try.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last one. Fill in the blank. Community is...
And I'm going to use this. This is a word that I actually learned in church, so I hope it's not too churchy for anybody that's listening. Community is one anothering. It's focusing on another person and making your decisions matter. Your decisions about that person more important than decisions about yourself. So community is. So I could say love, which is a broader term, but I would say one anothering. It's saying, I'm going to do whatever I can for the other person, and I'm going to make my decisions about helping them be successful and help them. So one anothering is my word.
Well, thank you, Ricky.
Yeah.
I've loved this conversation so much.
Yeah.
And I really thank you and feeling really honored to be able to be here and be the person that interviewed you.
Well, thank you, Sway. It is a privilege, and thank you also for allowing me to have this conversation in a way that I think was good for me too. It was very, very helpful. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, look at that. We're right on time.
Yes.
You've been listening to the Fremont Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever it is that you listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you're so inclined, leave a kind review so that others can find the podcast. To stay connected with us, you can find links to our social media and other content at thefremontpodcast.com. I'm Gary Williams. Andrew Cavett is the editor. Music is provided through soundstripe.com. Join us next week on the Fremont Podcast.
This is Muggins Media.